We start, of course, on this election day in Virginia. We could see a sign of what to expect in the midterm elections next year and maybe even the presidential election in 2024.
Voters in Virginia are casting ballots for control of the governor's mansion. Last night, Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin delivered his closing message in Northern Virginia, while Democrat and former Governor Terry McAuliffe was in the state capital, Richmond. McAuliffe's once commanding lead has evaporated, paving the way for a neck-and-neck race. One of the big issues Youngkin has been pushing in this race, control over schools and what kids are being taught.
No. This is a moment for Virginians to push back on this left liberal progressive agenda and take our Commonwealth back.
What bothers me to my core is what this man is doing. He's dividing parents against parents, parents against school boards. He's using your children as political pawns in his campaign. It is a racist dog whistle.
We'll kick it off with Steve Kornacki, of course, a familiar face on an election day, NBC News political correspondent, and he is with us at the big board. Steve, good morning. So, of course, this marquee contest on a busy election day is the race for Virginia governor. What do we know from the polls right now?
Yeah, polls say this thing is coming right down to the wire. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, against Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat. The poll average actually has Youngkin up by a very, very small amount coming in today. Basically means this is a dead even race, but Glenn Youngkin does have a shot. The Republicans have a shot, and this is notable, in a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points last year. This wasn't just a Biden win. This was a double-digit Biden win. What are we going to be looking for as the results come in tonight? About 7 o'clock Eastern, by the way. We expect a lot of votes to start coming in right when polls close in Virginia. A couple things I'm going to be looking at tonight. Number one, right here, circling these blue counties right outside Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia. This is the population center, really, of Virginia. A lot of people here. There's been a long-term trend in this area away from the Republicans toward the Democrats. But during Donald Trump's presidency, that trend accelerated. Democrats drove up massive margins in this part of the state. It's why Biden was able to win so comfortably. So one thing we're going to be looking for when those results come in tonight, here's the question. Has Glenn Youngkin, have the Republicans been able to win back a critical number of the suburban voters they gave up during Donald Trump's presidency? I'll give you an example. You were just playing there, Youngkin at that rally in Loudoun County last night. This is where he closed his campaign. He closed his campaign in Northern Virginia, in a county that Joe Biden won by 25 points last year. Take a look at what Loudoun County looked like before Donald Trump came along. This is back in 2012. It was a swing county. Mitt Romney, the Republican, came within 4 points of winning Loudoun County. Donald Trump comes along. Republicans now losing Loudoun County by 25 points. Can Glenn Youngkin, can Republicans make inroads in Loudoun and in Northern Virginia? And the other key thing we're going to be looking for tonight is it is true that in the big population hubs, Northern Virginia, Richmond suburbs, Democrats made the big gains in the Trump era. But Southwest Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, there are parts of Virginia where Republicans actually did make gains during Donald Trump's presidency. Counties where Trump was doing 20, 30, even in some cases 40 points better than Mitt Romney did back in 2012. The other question is, when you look at rural Southwest Virginia, has Glenn Youngkin managed to keep those Trump levels of support? Because that's what Republicans need to pull this off. They need to maintain the support that Trump gained in rural Virginia, and they need to win back. So they're under no illusions. They don't think they're going to win them all back, but they need to win back enough suburban voters in Northern Virginia. That's how a Republican could win back Virginia. We'll find out if Glenn Youngkin did it.
We certainly will. A lot to watch for tonight. You're going to have a late night.
You got it. I'm looking forward to it, though.
We'll be getting our updates from you. Steve Kornacki, as always, thank you for kicking us off on an election day.
Thank you.
NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella joins us now from a polling location in Virginia Beach, which is Purple City, inside what is at least right now a swing state. So, Heidi, why is this race in the national spotlight? What makes it so important?
Virginia is always, if not a bellwether, at least a proxy for the national mood. This is the first chance that voters have to cast their referendum on the new administration. And losing doesn't necessarily predict the midterms for Democrats, but it certainly would not be a great segue. It also tests whether Trump is still a powerful motivator for those suburban women who Steve Kornacki just mentioned. So just a lot of national themes that come into this race.
Heidi, voters have been turning out for early voting in large numbers. I know it's really early there right now, but what are you seeing? Are they fired up? What's the enthusiasm level?
Well, there was a line here outside this polling location starting at 6 a.m. for folks to get in. Look, off-year elections, you always have the more loyal, the more passionate voters, and we've already talked to them on both sides. For Republicans, that issue is education. And the notion that parents don't have control of what's happening in the curriculum and classrooms. For Democrats, it's still this feeling that Trump and Trumpism is an existential threat. Take a listen to voters who we talked to on both sides.
Definitely the education, what the parents have an ability to say so, and that resonated with me. Typically, I do vote Republican all the time.
Just about everything. I mean, we can talk about the vaccine or the pandemic or whatever. We can talk about schools. We can talk about the economy. I mean, all of those issues. I'm concerned about my children and my grandchildren.
So as you can see, folks are moving in here, even in the 7 a.m. hour and voting. And here's the thing that will be hard to predict, though, about today is whereas in 2020, a lot of the voting by Democrats took place early or absentee. This year, Republicans are urging their voters to do the same thing. So it's going to be really hard to gauge what a big turnout at actual polling locations means.
And Heidi, quickly, we just heard that one voter talk about education. We heard the candidates talking about it. Is that a big issue from what you're hearing from voters?
Education, absolutely. Look, when do you have an election where education is the top issue? It vaulted 9 points just within a matter of weeks, and it's an issue primarily for Republicans, but for Democrats as well, with the pushback saying that this issue of critical race theory being taught in schools is all just a made-up dog whistle. For Republicans, they really believe it's happening, even though many of them who I interviewed were not able to give specific evidence of what it is about the curriculum that constitutes critical race theory. Joe?
All right. Heidi reporting from Virginia Beach. Thank you.
And tonight, Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker host special election night coverage following the key races across the nation and what the results mean for the direction of the country. Stream the Meet the Press Election Night special tonight at 9 Eastern right here on NBC News Now. House Democrats are meeting today behind closed doors to try to continue to work out how to pass President Biden's sweeping economic agenda. Senate moderates are pushing for a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure deal alone. Progressives are digging in their heels, saying both bills must go through at the same time. Here's what Senator Joe Manchin had to say about it yesterday.
Twice now, the House has balked at the opportunity to send the BIF legislation to the president. As you've heard, there are some House Democrats who say they can't support this infrastructure package until they get my commitment on the reconciliation legislation. It is time to vote on the BIF bill, up or down, and then go home and explain to your constituents the decision you made.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. So, Ali, good morning. Of course, Senator Manchin has publicly spoken out about his opposition to certain parts of this deal throughout this process, often being blamed for being the reason that the whole process is being held up. So he made those comments at a press conference yesterday. Tell us more about the latest that we've heard from him.
Well, Savannah, you know that he has been not just one of the key voices on this, but one of the central negotiators. He referenced that yesterday when he stood at that podium in the Senate studio in front of most of the Capitol Hill press corps and reiterated a lot of the things that we had heard from him before. But certainly timing is everything in the context of what Joe Manchin says. Progressives at the end of last week, and frankly, much of Washington, were waiting to see if they would get a public commitment from Manchin that he would vote for the framework that the White House rolled out at the end of the week. When I caught up with him one of those days towards the end of the week, he said the price tag felt fine to him. That was, in his words, negotiated, even though it was a little bit higher than the $1.5 trillion he had previously said he was comfortable with. Now, it seems like it's still a question of cost, but future cost. Listen to how he put it.
How can I, in good conscience, vote for a bill that proposes massive expansion of social programs when vital programs like Social Security and Medicare face insolvency? As more of the real details outlined in the basic framework are released, what I see are shell games, budget gimmicks that make the real cost of the so-called $1.75 trillion bill estimated to be almost twice that amount.
So look, there's a few things here. When he talks about insolvency of existing programs like Medicare, that's something that he's talked about throughout this process, and part of why he's been averse to things like expanding Medicare coverage or even vouchers that would help people with costs of things like vision, dental, and hearing. That was a big priority for Senator Bernie Sanders, and our understanding is that at least right now in this 11th hour, there are negotiations to try to keep those policies in, and those conversations are ongoing with Manchin. But the other piece of this too is, you'll remember, this pays for more than it spends in this bill right now. 1.75 roughly in spending and just shy of $2 trillion in pay-fors. That being said, what it sounds like Manchin is asking for here, even though he didn't say these words, is a CBO score, Congressional Budget Office score, that would give a little bit more of a sense of what the financial impact of this is. And all that really does, Savannah, is slow it down.
All right, so Allie, is there any chance then that there will be a deal this week?
It doesn't look like anyone is saying that explicitly at this point, but what we've heard from Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who leads the Progressive Caucus, is a lot of discipline in her message, where she's effectively, every question that we've asked her about what Senator Manchin's impact on this process is, she has simply said, I trust the president when he tells me that he can get 51 senators on board for this, or 50 senators on board for this. Biden has clearly been exercising his relationships with Manchin, and this is how Jayapal put it yesterday in the aftermath of hearing from Manchin. Listen.
I just have to believe what the president says. And the president said right after the senator spoke that he is confident he can deliver 51 votes for this plan. I am going to trust the president. Our members are going to trust the president. And we are going to do the job that we need to do, which is pass both bills through the House. And whatever Senator Manchin says is up to him.
So quietly, our sources are saying to us that they think that this could come at the end of the week. But one big thing has to happen on the House side. In order for that to happen, the Rules Committee has to meet. The reason that they did not meet yesterday is because parts of the bill text were still being written and negotiated. Once that happens, once they're written and negotiated, then the Rules Committee can meet, debate this, and then it can be sent to the full House floor. But again, progressives are underscoring, as they have this entire time, they have to do both bills together. They're holding fast on that.
All right, Ali Vitale, the saga continues. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Now, it's a critical day in the race to vaccinate more children against the coronavirus.
Today, a CDC committee is meeting to discuss the Pfizer vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11. An FDA panel has already recommended the shot, and it's likely the CDC will do the same. If the panel signs off on the vaccine today, it will go to the CDC director for emergency authorization.
Now, this could lead to a major boost in vaccination, since 28 million more children will be eligible for the vaccine. The White House says it's ready for the rollout.
We are planning on some vaccinations towards the end of this week, but the program for kids ages 5 to 11 really hitting full strength the week of November 8th.
But doctors may face another challenge, convincing parents the shot is worth it. A recent survey shows only about 1 in 3 parents will get their kids vaccinated right away. Let's bring in Dr. Amish Adalja. He's a senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. So, doctor, how will this meeting work today? Is it pretty much a given that the CDC will sign off?
I do think that the CDC committee is going to recommend this be a routine immunization for children in that age group. However, there's going to be a lot of debate on which children benefit the most, what risks there may be, how to think about this vaccine in terms of what you're trying to prevent. Are you trying to prevent mild illness, serious illness, and all of that's going to come out in the discussion. But I assume at the end of the day, they're going to vote to recommend this be something that we embark on and that the CDC director will sign off on it immediately.
And even while we're waiting for that, the Pfizer vaccine for kids is actually already being shipped out across the country. By the way, it's about a third of the dose given to adults. What are you watching out for as this starts being administered to 5 to 11-year-olds?
I'm looking to see what the uptake is going to be. There's probably about a third of the parents of 5 to 11-year-olds that are going to be rushing to get this vaccine. I think that's a good thing. And then there's going to be some parents that take a wait and see approach. And it's trying to understand how that vaccine uptake goes in those other groups that are not as eager to get the vaccine. That's going to be key. And I also want to see how well pediatricians are engaged in this. One of the plans that the administration is using is to enlist pediatricians. So it's not going to be mass vaccination sites. It's not going to all be drugstores, but also pediatricians pediatricians' offices, and we know that parents trust pediatricians, and I think they may do a good job at trying to answer parents' questions and hopefully get more children vaccinated.
And Dr. Adolja, one of the main concerns some parents have, the side effects, especially that rare heart condition, myocarditis. So do we know how often COVID vaccines cause heart conditions in kids, and do they have lifelong impacts?
Well, what we know about myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, is that it is a rare side effect from the vaccine, but it's more likely to occur from natural COVID than it is from a vaccine. So the vaccine actually prevents COVID-19 from causing myocarditis, but we have seen people get myocarditis, but it's usually not in that 5 to 11 group. It's usually 16 to 29. That's where the high risk group is in males who get these mRNA vaccines. And there it's about 11 cases per 100,000 doses, but these are mild, they're transient, they don't have lasting damage. They can be scary anytime that your heart is inflamed, but these are definitely manageable.
All right, Dr. Amish Adolja, as always, thank you.
Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns is with us. Bill, good morning.
Well, good morning. You know, sometimes we say, like, you know, oh, wow, we're on a roller coaster ride with the weather. Well, today we're taking it up a notch because today we are officially in weather whiplash.
Oh, yes. That sounds ominous.
Yes, I like the sound effect there.
I'm afraid to even move on with the graphics because it's just that dramatic.
Okay.
All right, so let's get on
Weren't
with
we quiet yesterday?
It's still quiet today. I have to really jazz this up. All right. So in October, we had extreme warmth in areas of the east, and in the west, it was cool for October. And here's how it ended up. We added up all the numbers in the areas that we have the dots in red, including Newark, New Jersey, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Akron, Ohio, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Warmest October ever recorded for those locations. The yellow dots, it was top 3 ever. So now we just got done with that. And now all of a sudden we've started November with this cool blast of air that's moving through the Midwest and the Great Lakes. That's arriving in the East Coast. And it's just kind of a little shock to the system, but it's actually pretty close to where we should be for this time of year. And we're going to get the first freeze of the season. So my cherry tomatoes, I got to pick them today because they are done after tonight. The cold air will be moving into numerous locations. About 20 million or so people under freeze warnings as the end of the growing season arrives this evening. So tomorrow morning, grab the jacket, hat, and gloves. Some areas, guys, in the 20s. So you got to find the winter clothes.
Wow.
It's officially that time.
Kind of excited. All right.
Yeah, me too. All right, I get the whiplash thing.
All right.
Makes sense. Abortion providers in Texas are now in limbo as the Supreme Court mulls over arguments made in 2 landmark cases challenging the state's highly restrictive ban called Senate Bill 8.
The justices questioned whether the structure of the bill was constitutional during a nearly 3-hour hearing yesterday. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams breaks down the key arguments.
Opponents of abortion rallied outside the Supreme Court in support of SB 8, the Texas law that bans abortion after doctors can detect a fetal heartbeat. That's at about 6 weeks of pregnancy before most women know they're pregnant.
There is no question that a heartbeat signifies life, and that beating heart in a womb is the life of a human child.
The Supreme Court has long said state officials cannot ban abortion that early in a pregnancy. So the Texas legislature handed off enforcement to private individuals, allowing anyone to sue any doctor who performs an abortion or anybody who helps out. The state says abortion providers should have to wait until they're sued before challenging the law. But Texas ran into a wave of skepticism from even some of the court's conservatives, including Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh, who earlier voted against temporarily blocking SB 8. Justice Barrett said she doubted that making the challengers wait to be sued would give them a fair shot at defending their rights.
I'm wondering if, in a defensive posture in state court, the constitutional defense can be fully aired.
And some members of the court worried that other states could copy the Texas model to limit a host of constitutional rights.
We would be like open for business. There's nothing the Supreme Court can do about it. Guns, same-sex marriage, religious rights, whatever you don't like, go ahead.
Justice Kavanaugh said a state could allow private lawsuits against the guns it wanted to ban.
Say everyone who sells an AR-15 is liable for $1 million to any citizen.
The case was not about abortion itself. The court will take that up when it hears Mississippi's challenge to Roe v. Wade. For now, SB 8 remains in effect until the Supreme Court rules. That would normally take several months for a ruling, but because the Justice justices took these cases on a fast track. The ruling will likely come quicker, and then abortion providers in Texas can try again to get the law blocked. Joe, Savannah?
Pete Williams, thanks so much.
Let's now take a look at what's making news around the world this morning.
NBC News correspondent Claudia Lavanga is with us from Rome. Claudia, good morning.
Morning, Joe. Morning, Savannah. Well, according to Reuters, at least 15 people were killed and 34 more were injured when 2 explosions went off at a military hospital in Kabul. Well, now the Wire agency spoke to the spokesperson for the Taliban's interior ministry that confirmed that the 2 explosions took place at what is considered to be the biggest military hospital in the whole of Afghanistan. Another local Wire agency in Afghanistan says that following the explosions, a number of Islamic State fighters entered the hospital and engaged in a shootout with security personnel. Now let's move to Brazil, where a cave collapsed during a training exercise, killing at least 9 firefighters. Now the rescue team was just practicing their rescue techniques when part of the mine they were in crumbled upon them. The 6 more were rescued alive and suffered minor injuries, but another 1 had to be hospitalized with hypothermia and multiple fractures. Now last but not least, let's go to Disneyland Shanghai, when on Sunday, more than 30,000 visitors were told they could not leave the park until or unless they tested negative to COVID-19 after one of the visitors tested positive to the virus or was in touch with someone who tested positive. In the end, all 33,000 and more tested negative and they could leave the amusement park, but I guess they were not so amused after all, guys.
Yeah, no kidding. They were not messing around there.
Yeah,
all right.
Not the worst place to be locked inside.
As long as the roller coasters get going.
We're Disney fans. Yeah, I wonder, though, if they let
Probably
anybody.
Not.
Yeah.
All right, Claudia,
stay
thank you.
right where you are, 6 feet apart. Thanks.
Right.
This Thanksgiving, a famous New York tradition is making a full comeback. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade will return to its pre-pandemic form. That means the crowds will return and the route will go back to normal, unlike last year when it was just 1 block long. New balloons, including Pikachu and I think it's pronounced Ada Twist Scientist. Apologies if I got that wrong. Also, celebrities will include Carrie Underwood, Jimmy Allen, and Kelly Rowland. Our friends from The Today Show, of course, Savannah Guthrie, Hoda Kotb, and Al Roker will host the 3-hour telecast, which will be broadcast, of course, on NBC and Peacock. The parade had a much more subdued look last year as the pandemic raged across the country, with very few onlookers, a much shorter route, and fewer floats. It was still nice to have it last year. It just was very strange.
I feel like for a lot of people at home, it might have felt somewhat the same because you could just see it. But now, Joe, this is going to be your first New York year where you're going to get the full experience.
I know, throughout the whole city. That'll be really cool.
I know, very exciting. I'm so excited for you in the holiday season here. All right, thanks, Joe. Now, you may remember we've started a series here where we focus on the latest studies and trends that could impact your mental health. For this week's roundup, we have our friend, NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. She's going to help us get mentally fit. Dr. Patel, good morning. Always great to see you. So let's start with this one. A recent study is suggesting meat eaters might actually be less depressed and anxious than vegans. Now, while this particular study does point out there's no causation, I want to ask, is there a link between what we eat and how we feel? How can we improve our diets to boost our energy or reduce stress or anxiety?
Yeah, this is, Savannah, one of those kind of age-old kind of known facts where we know that what we eat actually does affect so many things in addition to just our weight and our mood and our metabolism. So one of these studies actually did find, it just, again, as you say, it's not causation, it's just a correlation that people who eat meat seem to be happier than people who followed a vegan diet. I will just stress that what I think is probably the rule that we should follow is everything in moderation. So if you have a vegan diet, just making sure that you balance that diet to get some of the proteins or some of the vitamins that you might be missing because you choose to not have meat in your diet. And then alternatively, if you have a heavy meat diet, making sure that you also have some of those leafy vegetables and fruits on board, because you do need a balance of everything. If you think about what just is natural and what's growing in the ground and growing on trees, that's how you should think about approaching your body. And then finally, making sure that your mood, if you notice that there are alterations in how you're feeling based on your diet, it really could be your diet that's causing it. So look into that, talk with a nutritionist or with a physician who's trained in nutrition, and they can help you think through what diet is best for you.
Great advice there. All right, now here's a good one. Earlier this week, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley announced he's going to be stepping away from football for a mental health break. He's the latest in a series of high-profile athletes who are really stepping up to protect their mental health. Of course, this was a big conversation with Simone Biles after the Olympics. Are we seeing the end, do you think, of the stigma for athletes and mental health? And how can people who maybe aren't in the spotlight, aren't an athlete, but still want to make a similar decision in their everyday lives do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I think having prominent athletes, prominent political figures, just people we respect, I think it's a really important first step. Here's what I'm just going to tell people. I think it's important to think of mental health disorders no different than you would think about a heart attack, a diagnosis of cancer, or a diagnosis of diabetes. Wow. You wouldn't think twice if somebody said to you, Savannah, I just got diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to need to take a step back. We know that mental health disorders are in the same category. There should be no difference between a mental ailment and a physical ailment.
Absolutely. That's so important. Finally, there's this TikTok trend. It's called That Girl. It's totally taking over. And it's showing the visually pleasing routines of women becoming that girl. That's kind of what the whole trend's about. It includes workouts, meditation, journaling. Now, all those things seem like they might be positive, but how can this new trend be dangerous and harmful, setting this expectation of that girl? And what can we take away from these videos without them affecting our self-esteem?
Yeah, even watching these videos actually did give me this broad range of effects. At first, it looks like empowerment and kind of coming forward with independence and attitude. And I can see why many young women really are gravitated toward that. But then over time, Savannah, just even watching them myself, I started to think about, gosh, I don't look like that. How come I can't be like that? Why can't I achieve X, Y, and Z? And I think it creates a really dangerous, slippery slope. And I would just say that to anyone watching or to family members who know that they're watching this, just caution them. This isn't reality. And I think that's the most important thing. If it inspires, great, but don't put too much of this into how you live your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. Also, I'm not sure that any of those girls have a job or go to school because that stuff takes a lot of time. So you got to keep it in reality. All right, Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Colin Kaepernick's new docu-series titled Colin in Black and White is out on Netflix. It takes a closer look at how the former NFL quarterback navigated race and activism leading up to the moment he took a knee during the national anthem. At one point, Kaepernick compares the NFL draft process to a slave auction. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hillier takes a closer look at the film and how people are responding.
What they don't want you to understand is what's being established is a power dynamic.
Former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick's new Netflix special igniting debate on social media after it compared the NFL's drafting process and its workout performance review called the Combine to slavery.
Next one coming up, best one we got.
In the opening minutes of the special titled Colin in Black and White, a line of black actors playing NFL prospects morph into slaves at an auction with shackles on them.
Look at this here.
I think what we're supposed to take away from the comparison of the NFL Combine to a slave auction is the question of dehumanization and the ways that there are power imbalances related to race and class in how that dehumanization takes place.
The Netflix special promoting the story of Kaepernick's formative years navigating race, class, and culture. Some critics rejecting the slave auction comparison on social media, including Utah's Republican Congressman Burgess Owens, a former NFL player who tweeted out, "How dare Kaepernick compare the evil endured by so many of our ancestors to a bunch of millionaires who chose to play the game?" In 2016, Kaepernick, then a star for the San Francisco 49ers, began kneeling or sitting during the national anthem, protesting police brutality and racism.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
After other players followed his lead, the NFL in 2018 implemented a no-kneeling policy during the national anthem, threatening to fine teams with players who refused to stand. That same year, basketball star LeBron James commented on HBO's The Shop uninterrupted.
And in the NFL, they got a bunch of old white men owning teams, and they got that slave mentality. And it's like, this is my team. You do what the I tell y'all to do.
The NFL has not commented on Kaepernick's comparison. No team has signed Kaepernick, now 33 years old, since 2017.
Where does he anticipate a conversation like this going from here? You speak out about the Combine and make this comparison to actually change the Combine. While systems may be lined up against you, those systems are possible to change. I just think he wants to be a living monument to that.
Thank you, Devon Hilliard, for that report. Colin in Black and White is streaming now on Netflix. New fallout this morning related to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. The CEO of banking giant Barclays, Jess Staley, has stepped down from his position immediately. This follows an investigation by British regulators into his relationship with Epstein and the release of some of the initial results of that probe. NBC News senior business reporter Ben Popkin joins us now with more on this announcement. So, Ben, first of all, walk us through how this investigation started in the first place. Do we know how deep Staley's ties go with Epstein?
Epstein was already a client of a private bank at J.P. Morgan when Staley took over that private bank in 2000. The two met and they developed a professional relationship. According to reporting, Epstein referred multiple clients to Jess Staley over the years. And Staley has always maintained that it was always purely professional and that he had no contact with Epstein after 2015, which is when he left J.P. Morgan and later became the head of Barclays. But the investigation began when UK regulators received a cache of emails between Staley and Epstein from his time at J.P. Morgan that suggested they had more than the mere professional association that Staley had always represented. Epstein was convicted in 2008 of procuring a child for prostitution and soliciting a prostitute, but Staley and others in the elite circles of wealth and power continued to have associations with him. Staley visited Epstein's private island twice with his wife, the bank has confirmed, and Epstein put Staley down as a personal reference when Epstein formed a private offshore bank on that island in 2013 following that conviction.
So, Ben, we know Barclays said in a statement that the probe has not found any evidence Staley was aware of or saw Epstein's alleged crimes that he was arrested for in 2019. The bank also says Staley plans to contest the findings of the probe. So what else are British regulators looking for when it comes to this relationship?
What they're really looking at is whether Staley mischaracterized their relationship and whether he was being completely transparent in his disclosures. Staley has maintained that he has been completely transparent with both the bank and with regulators. Last February, he said, quote, of Epstein, "I thought I knew him well, and I didn't. I'm sure with hindsight of what we all know now, I deeply regret having had any relationship with Jeffrey Epstein." In an internal memo sent to staff when he stepped down, Staley said he plans to push back on these findings, and he didn't want that pushback to be a distraction. We reached out to Staley multiple times, and he hasn't responded to our request for comment.
And Ben, quickly on this last point, now that Staley has stepped down, what's the impact on Barclays?
Well, it's a black eye for Barclays, but they'll continue Staley's strategy of trying to run an investment bank from London, and one of his former colleagues from J.P. Morgan will take over. But the main point is that the continuing stain of association with Epstein has been removed from their leadership for now.
All right, Ben, thanks for joining us on this. Appreciate it. Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao is with us this morning. Hey there, Silvana. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. So Apple is cutting production of the iPad to divert chips to the new iPhone 13. That's according to a report by Japan's Nikkei. Sources say iPad production is about half of Apple's original plans. Parts intended for older iPhones are also being shifted to the iPhone 13. Apple is prioritizing iPhone 13 production in part because it's forecasting stronger demand for the smartphone than the iPad as Western markets emerge from the pandemic. The Americas and Europe account for 2/3 of Apple sales. Zillow is looking to offload about 7,000 homes for upwards of $2.8 billion. The move comes a few weeks after Bloomberg reported the real estate company stopped buying homes as part of its flipping business because of a bloated backlog. One Wall Street analyst says most of the homes are underwater, meaning the mortgage has a higher principal than the home is worth. And Peloton and Delta Airlines are bringing fitness classes to the skies. Peloton says the new programs will be available on all Delta flights equipped with seatback entertainment. Instructors will lead you through stretching exercises and mid-flight meditation. This is the first time Peloton is making its classes available to stream outside its app, bike, and treadmill. Back to you.
For a second, I thought they were going to put the bikes on the plane.
Yeah. Well, even stretching, it had to be a small stretch. How are you going to do that? Yeah, I guess the meditation, though, that makes sense. That's pretty cool.
Thanks, Silvana.
Yeah, you got it.
Now, a new NBC News poll just found 2/3 of registered voters believe their votes will be counted accurately. It comes as several GOP-led states, including Texas, have passed new voting laws. Texas Republicans say the changes are popular among most voters there. But in heavily Democratic Harris County, many are blasting the new law. Here's NBC News senior legal and investigative correspondent Cynthia McFadden with more.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's just beautiful.
Representative Jim Murphy, head of the Texas House Republican caucus, helped lead the charge for the new Texas voting law.
We are in a fight to save our democracy.
50 enraged Democrats tried to scuttle the bill by fleeing to D.C. It passed anyway. Provisions include new voter ID requirements to vote by mail and elimination of all voter drop boxes. The law also scraps two recent changes in Houston's Harris County, 24-hour voting and drive-through voting, though people with disabilities can still vote from their cars.
These laws are intended to get more people to vote and to make sure the people that do vote have their votes counted.
But Houston's Democratic Mayor Sylvester Turner could not disagree more.
You've called it Jim Crow 2.0.
All right. Underscore, underline, put quotation marks around it and then circle it. Because it's serious.
So who's right?
We have actually added days to early voting and more hours on those days.
He is right about that. There's already a 2-week early voting period in Texas, and the new law adds 2 days to that and extends daily voting times by at least an hour. But the mayor says such improvements are just window dressing, covering up changes that will make it harder for Black, brown, and poor people to vote.
Over 50% of the people who participated in the 24-hour voting were people of color.
Like Sylvia Pina, a working mother of 5 who says without it, she could not have cast her ballot.
It's not allowing people who want to vote to go vote. I think it's suppressing their voice and what they want to change.
Not so, says Representative Murphy. He says the new law will restore voter confidence and prevent cheating. But is there widespread voter fraud? Records from the Texas Attorney General's office reveal since 2004, only 154 people have been charged with voting illegally, out of 94 million votes cast.
Are you trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist?
It's sort of like locking your house at night. What's the chance of getting broken into? Really small. But you go ahead and do these things to secure things. And I don't think there's anything we want secured more than our election process.
The intent is to lock in those who are already in power, and they attempted to do that by restricting and suppressing people's right to vote.
Not true, says Representative Murphy, pointing out his party dropped a proposal to eliminate Sunday morning voting, popular with many African Americans. Meanwhile, here in Houston's Harris County, many believe the new election laws, which go into effect next month, is going to make voting harder, not easier.
All right, Cynthia McFadden, thank you so much for that report.
Very few students seem to like standardized tests. They bring a lot of stress and anxiety, and critics say they don't necessarily measure a student's academic ability.
Yeah, well, in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis wants to get rid of those end-of-year exams. NBC News chief education correspondent Rahima Ellis shows us how that could affect students.
Across the country, students cringe as they enter the classroom for test day.
I'm not really a good test person. I despise the test.
There's always that feeling that you're not going to do good on the test.
In the past year, states have either canceled their high-stakes end-of-the-year test, the students took the test and scores went down due to the pandemic, or they allowed students to opt out altogether.
Online learning was already much of a burden for me, so I didn't want to add more tests onto that.
No matter how hard I prepare for it, especially during the day of the exam, my mind would go blank. I would forget everything I've learned.
Richard Chow is a senior at Brooklyn Technical High School in New York City. His original test scores didn't meet the requirements for admission, but he was allowed in after his total academic record was reviewed.
Do you feel some anxiety about standardized testing?
I definitely feel anxious.
Do you think that the standardized test is the best way to determine what kind of student you are?
I don't think any one test can really determine one student's academic proficiency.
Test anxiety is one of the many reasons Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says it's time to replace those end-of-the-year high-stakes tests that determine students' promotions, graduation, even school funding. Instead, he's proposed multiple tests throughout the year to reduce stress and allow teachers to better monitor student progress.
Yes, we're going to continue to make sure that we're measuring results, having high standards, but we're going to do it in a way that's more student-friendly, parent-friendly, and teacher-friendly.
Shifting off and using something as an alternative could be a very positive gain. They also cause a lot of stress.
Daniela Montaldo is the clinical director at the NYU Child Psychology Center.
What we've learned is that these tests do have some intrinsic bias. They're not always representing and really capturing all of a students' abilities, and they're really not very supportive to those who are in the low income kind of bracket, and minority students are really at a disadvantage.
But some parents suggest testing is the only way to measure what their child knows.
Take it away completely off the board and not have an idea of where someone might be could set a lot of different tones.
Sarah Katrina is a parent and founder of Kids on the Yard, a tutoring agency.
It could set the tone of, okay, then we don't have confidence in you that you can reach this mark, even though it's been a difficult year.
Difficult for kids who were already struggling at the start of the year.
We already knew that they were behind, but COVID-19 amplified that. Those children are brilliant. It's a reflection of poor instruction and low expectations.
Sonia Thomas is the mother of a high school student and founder of an advocacy group of Nashville parents.
I began to realize that the shame that I was feeling as a mother and that he was feeling as a child, it wasn't our fault. Like, we're doing everything that we can.
Despite the anxiety, these students still believe the high-stakes tests serve a purpose.
Would you like to see the standardized test as we know it now go away?
In school, we have midterms. I feel like making it kind of like a midterm, but not having it weigh as much.
I feel like it is a good marker, but I feel like it should definitely be revamped in a way. It should be a little bit, there should be less weight put upon it. It shouldn't be a sole determiner in how successful you are academically and in school.
Florida legislators will have to approve any changes to the standardized tests. The results could weigh heavily on what other states do.
Thanks for Heyman for that. That's definitely a talker. Which test did you take?
Yeah, I did the SAT and the ACT.
You did both, okay.
And I did better on the ACT.
Okay.
I was stressed out of my mind for both of them. Right? I mean, it's just, it is anxiety inducing.
Yeah, well, in Minnesota, I took the ACT, and I tested way below the school I wanted to go to, the average. I don't know why. I don't know if it's anxiety, but I did not do well. And then they said, take it a second time, you'll do better. And I got the exact same score. So thankfully,
it was
Northwestern looked at other things, let me in. So.
No, true. I think also just like the being under the clock and everything, I know that really affects my sister.
Some folks,
yeah, it's an interesting one.
Good conversation to have. All right,
definitely.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.